Part 11, I believe, the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the title of this one is Preserving the Scrolls. I don't know what. Oh, that shows kind of what they're made of. Scalpel and tweezers there picking at it. God, what a chore. Here's another one, another image here. I'll pick this one up. These are fingers. Here's some of the writing. These are needles. I think this is where the material was stacked, like pages. Let's see if I can get a better shot here. It's blurry in the image, so I can only go so far there, but kind of give you an idea. Replicating the conditions under which the scrolls survived for hundreds of years is difficult. As new preservation techniques develop, the likelihood that the scrolls will survive hundreds more years seems more certain. Since their discovery, the preservation of the Dead Sea Scrolls has been a major concern for scholars and conservators. Though the dry, arid climate of the Judean desert provided the scrolls a relatively stable environment, the 2,000-year-old manuscripts could not escape fully the ravages of nature. You know, I kind of wonder sometimes, you picture a biblical scene or something, and it's always a desert. That's not all. I mean, there's some areas there that aren't necessarily desert, but it's, and you look at the Middle East today, it stayed dry. I know the Garden of Eden was the Garden of Eden, but they're in this dry, arid environment, this and that. And I mean, why didn't he plant them in Montana before it was Montana? Something, you know. It's like, what a place. I can think of better places to start a group, but then again, they had the Garden of Eden. Now I've lost my place. Though the dry, arid climate of the Judean desert provided the scrolls a relatively stable environment. Well, if that's true, then the summer months I should be preserved forever here. The 2,000-year-old manuscripts could not escape fully the ravages of nature. Hot and cold desert winds whipped through the manuscripts' resting places in the Qumran caves, for example, while rats and other small desert creatures built their nests among the loose scroll fragments lying on the cave floors. Make sure I'm breathing. I hold my breath when I do this. Once the scrolls were removed from their caves, the deterioration of the delicate organic materials, parchment, and papyrus proceeded rapidly. Improper human handling also contributed significantly to the damage. Much of the early work on the scrolls was conducted at the Palestine Archaeological Museum, otherwise known as PAM, in Jerusalem, in a large room called the Scrollery. Thousands of fragments were placed between glass sheets spread out across long tables. In the process of sorting the fragments by text or document, archaeologists and scholars unwittingly caused irreversible damage by using adhesive tape to seal cracks or connect fragments together. That's not fair. When was this? I mean, if you had adhesive tape to keep these things together, I'm sure at the time that was state of the art. They didn't have that trick stuff they have now. But adhesive tape, when it came on the scene, that was state of the art. It's like duct tape. That was highest tech available. Moisture trapped between the sheets of glass, accelerating the deterioration. Further damage occurred when the scrolls in the Pam collection were moved to the Ottoman Bank in Jordan. During the 1956 war fought by Israel, France, and Britain against Egypt, the conditions in the bank vaults caused mildew to develop on the texts, making many of the compositions illegible. By the late 1960s, the condition of the scrolls had become a grave concern for both scholars and museum authorities. Sir Francis Frank and John Allegro were the first to call for better preservation techniques. In 1962, Frank of the British Museum claimed the adhesive was causing frightening damage to the fragments. By causing them to stick to the glass sheets. Allegro, the first British representative on the international team editing the Dead Sea Scroll fragments, proclaimed in a letter to the editor of the Observer newspaper in December of 1966, in quotes, "On a recent visit to the museum, I was horrified to see the scrolls subjected to intolerable pressure by the plates lying on top on one another in a large cabinet." In the 1960s, British conservators began the process of restoring the Dead Sea Scrolls, softening the leather with a specially made preparation and removing the adhesive tape with a scalpel and a solvent. Excuse me. The fragments were rejoined with thin strips of gummed silk or polyvinyl acetate glue. Now, watch this. 100 years from now, they'll be talking about these guys, how foolishly they used, or unwittingly used, gummed silk or polyvinyl acetate glue. And they'll have to explain it to the aliens when they're here. These stopgap measures, however, failed to stem the deterioration. In the 1970s and 1980s, a large portion of the collection was sent to the Israel Museum, where a team of conservators from the Israel Antiquities Authority, we're almost done here, continued treating the texts. Still more adhesive tape was removed, and the greasy stains left by the glue wiped away with a solution. Many fragments were reinforced with tissue paper, and the heavy glass plates were replaced with cardboard. Even these efforts proved only temporary. By the 1980s, it was evident more drastic conservation steps had to be taken. In 1991, the IAA established a climate-controlled center and laboratory in East Jerusalem for the conservation and preservation of the scrolls. The goal was to create an environment, humidity, temperature, and illumination similar to the scroll's first home. Why don't you just build a cave? The caves of the similar to the scroll's first home, the caves of the Judean desert. The primary objective of the conservators assigned to work on the scrolls was the removal of any remaining adhesive tape. Workers loosened the adhesive with water-based preparations and then applied a drying material to remove the tape, residues, and stains. Oh, excuse me. Then the backs of the fragments were reinforced. The manuscripts were rejoined using water-based adhesives, otherwise known as Elmer's glue. Maybe. A major wind tonight. Jeez. Today's conservators are careful to use only those techniques that can be easily undone should improved methods of conservation be developed in the future. But don't think the people of the future are going to cut you any slack for what you've done. No mercy. Let's see here. Of course, you knock the other guys with their tape technique. As long as worldwide interest in the scrolls remains strong, conservation and preservation efforts will continue unabated into the foreseeable future. Or until my name is out. Okay, last thing here. Shows a little image. That looks like overcooked bacon, if you ask me, but that's a piece of the scroll there. Ooh, 10 minutes. Last bit here, 2 paragraphs. Dressed for the occasion. The specially made preparation used by British conservators working on the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 1960s is called British leather dressing, which had been developed at the British Museum. The dressing was applied to the manuscripts to soften the leather and restore its lost flexibility. Excuse me. The concoction is made with lanolin, cedarwood oil, beeswax, and diethyl ether or hexane. You know where lanolin comes from? It comes from the wool of sheep. It's when I start shearing here, it should be any time I'll be covered with it. It stinks. The stuff you buy in the store, it's been prepared for use. Because it reeks when it comes off. The cedarwood oil acts as a fungus retardant. Yeah, being cedar, that would. And the beeswax, an optional ingredient, as a polish. Diethyl ether and hexane are solvents that assist in cleansing the leather. Valerie Folks, a conservator at the British Museum, worked on the scrolls using British leather dressing thinned with benzene, an additive meant to reduce the shiny film the dressing produced on the leather. Isn't benzene what they put in California gasoline that made everybody sick? In an effort to be more environmentally friendly. I think it was benzene. Over time, the manuscripts treated with British leather dressing became badly darkened, a usual side effect of the preparation. Numerous texts were rendered almost illegible, the text impossible to discern from the darkened background. Bummer. When we come back, a little bit on the many languages. That was part 11. Love you, God bless.